Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown, and this is a Caregiving Service. It's January 1st, 2023. So happy New Year. And thank you for being here and for watching. We gather on the first Sunday of every month for a caregiving service. It's an opportunity for us to gather for quiet reflection. I typically start off with a caregiving story. So let's start with Margaret. So Margaret was one of our Caregiver of the Year award winners I was trying to remember that this morning, 1996 or 1997. And Margaret cared for her mother and her son, whose name I think was Milton. And the reason I remember Margaret this morning is because she was a kind, lovely, gentle, quiet but loud advocate of a family caregiver. And I think about who we typically see in our world today. And we see those who have the most clicks, the most views, the most followers. And Margaret reminds me of the power of a life that really turns on love and being a good person. And I find that very comforting as we think about our next year, about who we will be in 2023 and how we will be. And I'm reminded that it's okay to not have a ton of followers, lots of likes on social media. It's much more memorable to be that gracious, kind, loving person who is a strong advocate for what's right. Okay, so that's Margaret. When I met her in 95 or 96, she would have been in her 60s, and I'm sure she's gone. And the reason that I like to share these stories of family caregivers that I've known over the years is to let you know you will be remembered. We are remembering Margaret today, who probably has been gone for many years, but her memory is alive. And her memory is alive because of the good work she did in her family. And you'll be remembered too. You will be remembered. So my dad tested positive for COVID on Christmas Eve. And it wasn't just the poor timing of a Christmas Eve diagnosis. It was also during our 36-hour Christmas chat. So on Caring Our Way, we had our chat room open for 36 hours over Christmas. So anyone could stop in and connect to good company and receive some support. Volunteers helped me, and we had some great volunteers this year who were so committed and got up early and stayed in the chat room late. And I don't want a volunteer to feel like they're doing this all by themselves, so I try to be as present as possible in the chat room. And I think the stress of my dad testing positive, plus just making sure that everybody had a good experience in the chat room, was a little too much for me because it wiped me out. Now I could have COVID. Perhaps that wiped me out too. But here's the irony, and I think you'll appreciate this as a family caregiver. So I followed the CDC guidelines. I wore masks whenever I interacted with my dad, and I was helping him and stopping in to see him and doing some personal care. And then I was able to get some help from the home care agency that's in his senior living community. Couldn't get help for him right away through them, but I persisted and got some help. And then I waited till day 6 or 7 to test myself, which is, again, the CDC guidelines. And so I did 2 tests, and they both came back as invalid. And I don't mean that we are invalid as family caregivers. I mean that we are in limbo. If that's not just the irony of being in limbo, I'm neither positive nor negative. And I think that's what happens throughout our caregiving experience, is that we feel like we're in limbo. Sometimes it can feel like things are on hold. And I think more often it feels like it's in limbo. Should I make this plan? Should I say yes? Should I pursue this? We're in limbo about how to move forward while still being available and still being present and still being a family caregiver. The other piece of this that I think is interesting is I actually had scheduled some time off for myself this past week. So I'm a small business owner, I'm a family caregiver, so taking time off is difficult. And as has happened, I can't tell you how many times when I clear my schedule, it's almost like my caregiving experience says, she has a clear schedule so she can manage a caregiving crisis. And it's happened over and over. And I'm sure when you think about it, you'll feel the same, that as soon as you open up your schedule to take a little time for yourself to relax, to have some moments that you can call your own, it seems like that's when the caregiving crisis happens. And so that's what happened this week as well. And I suppose my tiredness could also be related to just feeling a little discouraged that it's so hard to get that time, no matter how hard I try. And we try hard, which is why those messages about self-care that we can read in the media just seem so trite and out of touch. Because I scheduled self-care for myself this week, and my dad tested positive for COVID. I mean, there is no choice in that situation, really, is there? I'm available for my dad. He tested positive for COVID. Now, the good news is we're vaccinated, completely up to date with all our vaccinations. So grateful for that, because I know that our story would be very different had this happened 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So I'm grateful for that. And I also just really remember those who endured, oh my gosh, so much during the first 2 years of the pandemic, just endured so much. And so I think my dad and I actually are on the lucky side of that. Okay, so this morning when I woke up and I stayed in bed late, I thought, oh, should I do this caregiving service? And I thought, just put some lipstick on, just do it. So I appreciate you guys being here with me today for this caregiving service on the first day of the new year. Okay, so I wanted to mention some gratitudes for you, really, that are inspired by what this past week has been like for me, because I know that you have days and weeks like this that probably are so much worse than I just experienced. And so I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for enduring the discouragement and the disappointments. I want to thank you for figuring out how to live in limbo, because that's hard. That is hard. And I want to thank you for getting up every day and just putting on the lipstick, so to speak, and doing your best. Thank you for that. That's hard to do too, and yet you do it. Thank you. So we take a minute or two next to just remember. And today you could remember what you'd like from 2022. You can remember who you lost in 2022. My mom died in August. So I've been thinking of her today. I had the TV on for a few minutes before I joined you today, and I was watching on HGTV the Lottery Dream Homeowner Show. Can't remember the correct title, but it was one of my mom's favorites. She loved the host, David, and she loved the idea that you could win millions through a scratch off or just picking numbers. So I watched that this morning and remembered her and remembered how much she loved these shows. And I also loved that she loved David. As I probably talked about my mom, she was a devout Catholic. She had specific ideas about how we live, so to speak. And I don't mean in a judgmental way. She was very open-minded. But I guess when you think about her and her kids, so for instance, she had very specific ideas about a good life for me, and that was husband and kids. And that wasn't the good life that I wanted for myself. I wanted a small business. I just love to be in business. That is a passion for me. That is meaningful for me. That is exciting for me. That's what I love. So I love that she loves David, who is, a gay man who has tattoos covering most of his body. But she loved who he is as a person because you can just tell who he is: kind and loving and smart and inspiring, and really wishes the best for others. So kind of like Margaret, who I told you about earlier. Okay, so I love this idea of my mom, that she can be in many ways at odds with her beliefs and her values, and yet in line with her beliefs and her values, believing that we all deserve a good life. We all are good human beings who deserve love, who deserve to be valued, who deserve opportunities. So I'm going to remember that about my mom today. So what will you remember? Who will you remember? How will you honor that memory? What will you remember about yourself in 2022? How will you use that memory to inspire yourself in 2023? Okay. What will you remember? Who will you remember? And how will you take time for those memories today? And how will you use those memories to inspire yourself going forward? Okay, so we move into our intentional question part of the service, and I did not do a Sunday newsletter today with an intentional question because I was beat. So I'm going to take a page from Chris Brogan, who's a marketing guru, and I've been getting his Sunday newsletter for years. It's actually something I look forward to on Sunday mornings. I love to do a couple things on Sunday mornings: read Chris Brogan's newsletter and read this. I guess it's an ongoing series in the New York Times where they profile someone and how they spend their Sundays. I love that. Actually, it inspired a Caregiving Day, which is an initiative that we have where you tell us about what your day is like. What's a Caregiving Day like for you? And if you'd like to share what that's like, we'd love to share that with everybody else. I think it's interesting to kind of, open up the door and let us in and show us what your day is like. Okay, so Chris Brogan's newsletter today is a habit he has created for himself to start off the new year. He does this every year, and he picks 3 words that inspire his actions, his decisions, his plans, and his focus for the year. So he picks 3 words. So I guess that's what I'll ask of ourselves today. What are our 3 words that will really keep us looking forward in 2023? I'll include this recording on Caring Our Way, and in the comments section, feel free to share what your 3 words are that will drive your 2023. I'm still thinking about mine, and I hope that I will be inspired to actually have them by the end of today. So that's my goal for today. Remember my mom and come up with my 3 words for 2023. And so as we think of our intentions for this coming week, let's be intentional about our actions so that our actions are reflective of our values, so that we can take comfort in knowing that we live a valuable life, because our actions reflect our intentions, which reflect our values, and that creates our valuable life. Okay, so I'm going to close with gratitude for you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for doing it so well. And I think it's important for you to remember that, because it can be hard for you to see it as something that is well done. And it's well done by you. Okay, see you next month on the first Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And you can register to join me by going to caringourway.com. Thanks so much. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.